Welcome back to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence. Today we will be studying Joshua chapter 17. I do want to take a moment to address a concern that's been brought up. There have been comments made that maybe I'm not so great at all of this, and that's possibly the case. I'll leave that for you to judge. I just want to say that the reason that I'm doing this is, I guess, there's several reasons. Number one, this helps me study. This gives me a good reason to go verse by verse through the Bible and truly understand it. As somebody who's been teaching for 14 years, I've come to understand that in teaching, I learn more than I ever did as a student. And so me putting this information out there in a way that is kind of in a teaching mode, it's helping me. I'm growing by doing this. And while I may not be the best at it, I'm sure there are people out there that are far better at this than I am. I'm getting better. That's the whole point of me doing this. The other part of this is this will be preserved on YouTube and other places for my children and grandchildren and so forth. Those who come after me, even to the point of when I'm not around anymore, they'll still have these lessons to fall back on and to look at. And as I learn new things, and as something comes up that maybe I wasn't correct on in an earlier video, then it's easy enough for me to go back in and replace that video with a more updated version with a more correct understanding. So I acknowledge that I'm not the best at any of this. I never intended to imply that I was, but I'm giving my best effort, and I hope that is sufficient. So with that being said, let's get into the text. Joshua chapter 17 and verse 1. There was also a lot for the tribe of Manasseh, for he was the firstborn of Joseph, to wit, for Machir the firstborn of Manasseh, the father of Gilead, because he was a man of war, therefore he had Gilead and Bashan. There was also a lot for the rest of the children of Manasseh by their families, for the children of Abiezer, and for the children of Helek, and for the children of Azriel, and for the children of Shechem, and for the children of Hefer, and for the children of Shemitah. These were the male children of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, by their families. So you have here this oldest son of Joseph. We know that half of Manasseh is going to be on the west side of Jordan, that they were part of the three tribes that said, hey, we want to settle over here. We really like this land. And so Manasseh, half of Manasseh, that is, settled over there, but they then led the forces into the actual promised land on the, I'm sorry, I said the west, I meant the east, on the east side of the Jordan. They led the attack into the west side of the Jordan where the actual promised land was, and Manasseh actually has a portion of their inheritance therein, and it's a rather large tribe, and we're going to see at the end that they say that even that is not enough for them. They really wanted to spread out and take more land, and Joshua's like, well, if you can take this, then go for it. So but you see here, Manasseh is the firstborn of Joseph, and then Machir was the firstborn of Manasseh. And then presumably you have Gilead was his firstborn son, and here we are. Remember, Joseph was there in Egypt, and he had Manasseh and Ephraim when the families are brought in, and then it's not too far beyond that we see the Exodus. We talked about how Moses was fourth generation from Levi, and so his even though Levi was alive at the time when they came into the land, so was his son, that is the grandfather of Moses. And so here we have Machir born in the time that they were in Egypt, And then you have Gilead coming out of Egypt, and then it says he was the man of war. And anyway, they have all of these little sub-tribes, these families that are underneath this. And so that's what's being explained here, how the land is divided out amongst all of these families, and the eldest usually gets a double portion. They get the we saw Jacob and Esau. We saw that Jacob gets the birthright, the blessing from Esau, where Esau was essentially the firstborn and should have had it. And so that's what's being explained here. The firstborn getting his part, but then also all of these other families that descended out of Manasseh. And so it says there was also a lot for the rest of the children of Manasseh by their families. And then it goes on to name those families who proceeded out of Manasseh. These are the families that would have come out of Egypt. The names of the people that would have come out of Egypt and received that blessing directly. So Machir would have been the one that fell in the wilderness. Abiezer and Helek and all of these other guys. These are the ones that would have been in that generation that came out of Egypt and were unfaithful and fell in the desert. But then their children would have been the ones that are here now receiving that blessing that was given to their fathers. And then you have here this recounting of Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh. He had no sons but daughters. And these are the names of his daughters, Mahlah and Noah and Hoglah and Milcah and Tirzah. And the accounting of this is in the book of Numbers. We've already covered it. In fact, I can go ahead and I should have pulled that up before. Zelophehad. If I spelled it correctly. Nope, I didn't. It's an E-H-A-D. So yeah, Numbers 26, Numbers 27. And the daughters come to Moses and they say, we don't have any brothers. There's no males to continue on our father's line, and what do we do? And so God gave Moses instruction about that. If there are no brothers, so that the family doesn't die out, the land taken away from the family and given to another tribe, then it can indeed be given to the daughters. And so that's being recounted here in verse 3 and verse 4. They're going to come to Joshua now and say, hey, do you remember when Moses promised us this? And they're going to remind him of this. And so verse 4 says, and they came near before Eleazar the priest and before Joshua the son of Nun and before the princes, saying, Jehovah commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brethren. Therefore, according to the commandment of Jehovah, he gave them an inheritance among the brethren of their father. All right, and so they're reminding Joshua and Eleazar of this. Numbers 27, Numbers 36, these are the places where we see this happening. And so you have Numbers 36, even as Jehovah commanded Moses, so did the daughters of Zelophehad. So there's this the command that they're referencing, and so they do the things that God said, and so God blesses them with this inheritance, even though they didn't have any brothers. All right, it says, and there fell 10 portions to Manasseh beside the land of Gilead and Bashan, which were on the other side of Jordan. And Gilead and Bashan are important here. We're just reading of this division, but we're going to read of the land of Gilead. In fact, there's the famous song, There's a Balm in Gilead, that comes from later happenings and events that take place in these places. But right now we're just reading of them being divided up, the beginnings of these lands, and Bashan. And we'll read a lot about the land of Bashan and the cattle and stuff there. And when we read of them later on, it's not a good thing. They have gone by the wayside. They're part of those 10 northern tribes, and a lot of bad things is said. But here they have a good beginning. They have a faithful beginning, in that they went in and they conquered the land. But you're going to see where the problems stem from in this chapter. You're going to see why they ended up being corrupt in the end, and were eventually taken into Assyrian captivity and were never heard from again. So this is the beginning of that, and it's an interesting thing to see the foundation of their fall. Okay, and so it says, and there fell 10 portions to Manasseh, beside the land of Gilead and Bashan, which were on the other side of Jordan, because the daughters of Manasseh had an inheritance among his sons, and the rest of Manasseh's sons had the land of Gilead. So it's just talking about the idea of these women of Zelophehad who had no brothers. They received their inheritance as well. And the coast of Manasseh was from Asher to Michmethah, that lieth before Shechem, and the border went along on the right hand unto the inhabitants of En Tappuah. Now Manasseh had the land of Tappuah, but Tappuah on the border of Manasseh belonged to the children of Ephraim. And I showed the map in the last video of Manasseh and Ephraim. You can go back and look at that, or you can look it up online. Just type in map of Joshua 17, and it'll pull it up pretty succinctly for you. But the coast ascended into the river Kana, southward of the river. These cities of Ephraim are among the cities of Manasseh. The coast of Manasseh also was on the north side of the river, and the outgoings of it were at the sea. So Manasseh is a coastal tribe. Like they have part of their inheritance was on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. And then southward it was Ephraim's, and northward it was Manasseh's. And so this river kind of was a borderland for them as well. And the sea is his border, and they met together in Asher on the north and Issachar on the east. So Asher and Issachar are two other tribes, and it talks about how these all kind of came together, and you can see that on the map as well. And Manasseh had in Issachar and in Asher Bethshean and her towns, and Ibleam and her towns, and the inhabitants of Dor and her towns, and the inhabitants of Endor and her towns. And Endor is going to come back in to play when we get to Saul, so remember that it's not just a forest moon in Return of the Jedi. And inhabitants of Tanakh and her towns, and the inhabitants of Megiddo and her towns, even 3 countries. And Megiddo is absolutely one of those places that a lot of people will remember. It was a famous place for a lot of battles for the Israelite people, and it became known as a place of battle for them. So that by the time we get to places like the book of Revelation, and it talks about Armageddon, they're talking about the decisive battle in the valley of Megiddo. And it brings back up all of this history that surrounds this place. And so it's interesting to note that it is in Manasseh that we find all of these places of note. Manasseh was a very influential tribe. Ephraim was a very influential tribe, and it's no surprise because these are the 2 half-tribes of Joseph, and Joseph has a very powerful influence on the Israelite nation because of what Joseph did, and it could have been used for good because what Joseph did was so good, but instead they allow themselves to be corrupted, and they use that influence for evil. Verse 12, and yet the children of Manasseh could not drive out the inhabitants of those cities, but the Canaanites would dwell in that land. So here you have in these places that are named, including Megiddo, Manasseh could not drive out the inhabitants of those cities. Now remember, all of the fighting people are dead. They've already had those battles. Okay, this is not about inability to fight. What it is that God said, drive the people out, the people that were left in these city-states, the people that were left behind. We're talking the women and the children and the old people and the administrators, the non-soldiers or whatever. God says, drive them out of the land, make them move and go somewhere else. And when they get there, they choose not to do it. It says they couldn't do it. They let them dwell in that land. And then it says what they eventually do, verse 13, yet it came to pass when the children of Israel were waxing strong, they put the Canaanites to tribute, but did not utterly drive them out. And so instead of driving them out, they choose to allow them to remain, and they put them to tribute. And I think that a lot of this comes from what happened in Gibeon when they were tricked and they said, don't destroy us or whatever. And so Joshua and the others, because they did not consult God first, they make this treaty with these people, and then they're stuck with these people, and then that cascades into all of these other places where the Israelites go in and they conquer everything as God commanded them to do. But in the conquering of these cities, they own these cities. It says that they have control of these cities. They don't push the people out of the cities that they control now, and they say, no, we can't. Whether it's from feelings or whether it's from desire to trade with them or whatever the reasons are, they make the choice not to drive them out as God had told them to do. And instead they put them to tribute. They turn them into these kind of, I don't want to say second-class citizens, but these secondary nations that are required to pay taxes and do service, do menial labor, those kinds of things. They're not slaves. They're not bond servants, but they are as a separate people made to pay as a separate people. As a not Israelite, they are made to pay taxes and do all of these things. And I imagine that those that wanted to could proselytize, but that's not what happens. And so verse 14, and the children of Joseph spake unto Joshua, saying, Why have you given me but one lot and one portion to inherit, seeing as I am a great people, for as much as Jehovah has blessed me hitherto? So the children of Joseph, that's Manasseh and Ephraim, they come to Joshua. Look, there's a whole lot of us. Why have you only given us? Now, this is interesting because remember, Manasseh has the other part of the river on the east. If you go to the east of Jordan in the not promised land area where Reuben and Gad are, you also have Manasseh has covered all of the land of Og, the ruler there. And they have a huge swath of land. And then they also have a huge swath of land in the promised land on the west side of the Jordan. And they come to Joseph and they say, we don't have enough land. God has blessed us. We have all these people and we don't have enough land for all of them. And so Joshua answers them and says, if you be a great people, then get you up to the wood country and cut down for yourself there in the land of the Perizzites and of the giants, if Mount Ephraim be too narrow for you. Okay, so he tells them, specifically Ephraim, because Ephraim, if you look on a map, Ephraim doesn't have a very big area, but he tells them, look, you want more land? Go get it. There's nothing that says God has already granted to 3 tribes extra land on the east side of the Jordan. He said, that's fine. You can have that land if that's the land that you want. And so there's nothing that says, in the law of Moses, it says that Ephraim can't have more land than what God has promised. And I think this goes to the idea of God's blessings for us. God has promised us certain blessings. That does not mean that it is wrong for us to have even more blessings should we desire them. We pray for them. We submit ourselves to God and say, God, I believe I need these things. That's what the purpose of prayer is. God has already given us so much. But then he says, if you want something more, ask for it. And so here Ephraim is allowed to go out and to take more land if they believe that they need it. And so the children of Joseph said, the hill is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites that dwell in the land of the valley have chariots of iron. You can see this fear that we saw in Numbers 13 and 14. Ooh, excuse me. But we see this fear kind of rising back up. And then they say they have chariots of iron. Well, you have God. It reminds me of the scene in the first Avengers movie where Loki's sitting there talking to Tony Stark, and Loki says, well, I have an army. And Tony Stark says, well, we have a Hulk. Ephraim is sitting here looking at these guys, these Canaanites, and saying, man, they got chariots of iron. And Joshua's Like you have a God who's way infinitely more powerful than the Hulk. But it just reminds me of that. With God is on your side, what are iron chariots? They get washed away in the flood of the Red Sea. They're nothing. They're completely useless. God blink and they're gone, and it's not an objection that's meaningful. And so Joseph's like, you want it, you take it. If you really want more land, it's there for you to take. You can have it. And they complain about the iron chariots. And it says, but they who are of Beth Shean and her towns, and they who are of the valley of Jezreel. So in other words, all these people have all these iron chariots. And Joshua spake unto the house of Joseph, even to Ephraim and to Manasseh, saying, you are a great people and have great power. You shall not have one lot only. He's like, you're right. You guys there's a lot. You have a whole lot of people, and you don't have to have just this land. And I think Joshua here is reminding them, saying, all right, you're worried about their chariots, but you just got finished telling me that there's a whole lot of you. So if there's a whole lot of you, the iron chariot shouldn't matter. I really think that's what Joshua is coming out and saying here. But he says, but the mountain shall be yours, for it is a wood, and you shall cut it down, and the outgoings of it shall be yours. For you shall drive out the Canaanites, though they have iron chariots, and though they be strong. So Joshua says, look, there's a whole bunch of you. Go in and take it. Don't worry. God's going to be on your side. You're going to be successful. You're going to go in. You're going to drive them out, even though they have all of these things in their favor. And I really believe that if they had the faith that God could do the things that God has already shown them that he could do, that they would go in and they would drive out these people, and they wouldn't worry about iron chariots or whatever. But we see that there is still a little bit of fear in them, and there is this penchant that they have of not being able to drive out the people, and it comes back to bite them. There's a lot of people who will say they will look at the Old Testament, they will look at this conquest of Israel, of the Promised Land, and they will say, well, God is evil, or the Israelites were evil, or God in making the Israelites do this thing was evil, and there was this emotional appeal or emotional argumentation that when God told the Israelites to go in and wipe out the heathen nations here, that he was evil for killing all of the, or for having them kill all of the pregnant women and babies, right? Because it's always the pregnant women and babies. But that's not what they were told to do. They were told to drive them out. They were to kill the militant guys, which they've already done that. We already saw that in the early part of Joshua. But here they are taking over these cities, and they're supposed to drive them out, make them go somewhere else. Now, that in of itself sounds kind of harsh too. But remember, the adults are wicked. And in driving them out, having sympathy for them to that extent of, no, it's okay, you can stay, isn't healthy. It isn't helpful to Israel. It comes back and it corrupts them, and eventually they give over to this influence that they allowed to stay. But driving them out doesn't necessarily require that they were mean about it. Driving them out just says you need to make them move and go somewhere else. And they could have done that however they wanted to do that, in terms of, providing safe passage, providing provisions of, grab whatever you want to grab. We're not going to make you starve on the road as you move to somewhere else, but you must move, is what they should have done. But they don't do it. They have the same kind of bleeding heart mentality of, oh, how can we drive out these poor defenseless people, and they don't fully keep what God tells them to do. God, who is omniscient, knows the outcome of that, which is why he gives them the command in the first place. But they don't keep it, and it ends up eventually corrupting them, so that the northern tribes eventually fall to idol worship, and have once the kingdom splits, they have no good kings, and they eventually get taken into Assyrian captivity and are gone. They're taken out of the way, and we never see them again. We never will see them again. But the 2.5 tribes I say 2.5 tribes. There's the 3 tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi that we see in the southern kingdom managed to hang on through their own stuff for a little bit longer. And we're going to see a little bit of that, I think, set up in Joshua as well as we move forward. So thank you for joining me for chapter 17. We'll continue on with 18 as I can manage to do that with the time that I'm given. I'm thankful for this time to study these things through with you. As always, if you have questions or comments, please let me know in either the comments below the video or whatever channels you have for communicating with me. If you haven't yet, subscribe. That gets more people seeing these videos, and we can have more conversations about the Bible, which is always good. You can hit that little alarm bell for notifications for the next time the next video comes up. But all the things that the mechanics of YouTube, if you'll do those, like the video, that helps as well. And thank you for watching through all the way to the end. We will see you next time. My name is Ernie Lawrence, and this has been another Swordmaster Publications presentation.